We back. Yes, sir. And we're starting chapter 10. Over here, behavior and akios. The next Mida, we talked at length about Zahiros, and it's kind of work as a progression over here. Start off with self-awareness. You have to be aware of self in order to even begin the journey of working on yourself. And that self-awareness has to translate into action. And then comes Nikios. What does it mean to be cleanliness? Cleanliness is where you're stopping to do the thing and starting to become the thing, cleaning oneself. Right? Sur merav yaseh tov until I become completely tov. I'm gonna break down. Well, let's jump in and I'll break down exactly what the formula is for changing yourself. Right? When we talk about growth, how does one go about growth? What is the formula for growing? So I'm here. I want to be there. What do I have to do in order to get there? So let's dive in over here. So the virtue of cleanliness is associated with a person who has completely cleansed himself of all bad traits and all sins. There you go. Clean slate. They have removed themselves from the schmutz. They have zahirot themselves. They have zrizos themselves, and now they're in a place of nikias. Now, two important notes. Number one, it's like, okay, now that a person, like, should I not read this chapter until I've perfected the other ones? The answer obviously is no. Um, But in the ideal, right? We're teaching the ideal over here. This is what it leads a person to. Obviously, that's not going to happen, which brings us to the second point, which is why bother to try to pursue something that I'm never going to be successful in? If I like for what? If I know that I'm not going to be able to accomplish it, then why bother in the first place? And the answer is lo alecha ha'macha ligmor. Lo ata ben chorin is that you're not here to accomplish things. You're here to put in effort. You're here to grind. You're here to strive. That's what you're here for. In fact, right, if you were able to accomplish that feat, then what purpose would you have living at that point? I'll give you the best example. Our job in life is to be perfect. That's what the Sefer is. It's a roadmap to perfection. But can you become perfect? The definition of perfect is Hashem. So becoming perfect means you would be equivalent, akin to Hashem. That's not possible. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about striving for perfection your whole life. Write that down, make it a t-shirt. We're giving out bracelets. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about striving for perfection. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. That is what life is all about. So even though, right, we might not ever, as the Tanya calls it, what's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is someone who we would refer to this in this midah of nikios. And yet, right, so that means if I have taiva, if I have desire my entire life, I'm never going to be called a tzaddik. No, sometimes you are a tzaddik, sometimes you're a Russia, sometimes you're a Benoni. It fluctuates. But we're never going to become like it. Oh, just because like let's say I have anger issues or I have taivas for certain things, it's never going to leave me. My entire life is going to be one long journey of me trying to manage that particular negative midah. Yeah, yeah, that's your life. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Some people can accomplish things, right? But it's somewhere in there dormant. It's always going to be there. Your job is to not get to that finish line. And that's an important thing to keep in mind because as we're reading these things, you might say to yourself, oh my God, that's not me. I'm never going to get there. Am I doomed? No, no. God judges an effort. It's just about you striving towards this, ultimately towards this mitzvah. So Nikias is when a person has completely cleansed himself of the bad traits and the bad sins. They are now a clean person. This means not only to the sins that are acknowledged, such as the clearly recognizable, right, doing something that is usser outright, but also those of the heart that have been seduced into rationalizing as permissible, right? Those little things that we all do. We all have little things about us that, like, we know it's wrong, but like, whatever. I used to do this with in Israel, right? Back in the day before there was Rav Kavs, they used to have kartisim. Now you would buy to go on the bus, you would buy a 10 hole punch. And then they had Cartis Noir for 17 and younger. I was 18 years old, and I would buy the Cartis Noir because what's it to you? But what's it to me? It's 10 more bus rides is what's. And in my head, like, okay, whatever, like the bus is riding anywhere. It doesn't matter. Like me being on the bus is not taking away anything from them, whatever, it wasn't something like if you really sat me down at any point and said, is this right or wrong? I'd have no choice but to say, this is wrong. Obviously, this is wrong, right? But it was sort of something that like you don't think about. You just put it to the back of your head and yeah. It's not just about like obviously like oh I no longer eat treif, right? I no longer am Mechala Shabbos, shkayach. It's about even of that of the mind of the heart, like those little things that you might think are not so significant. You've cleansed yourself of those things as well. That's what Nikias is. In actuality, when we look into the matter, we will discover that the only reason one considers these things permissible is because his heart is slightly afflicted by lustful desire. I want, therefore I do. I want, therefore I am. Right? A person wants to be right, so they'll. We talked about this at length, right? Your desires, even for the belief system, right? When we talk about the conviction list, which is there are four different things that can steer a person's belief system. One is knowledge, because I know it's true. Belief, which means I have evidence, and therefore I believe it because there's enough evidence to support that belief. S, societal, as in society says it, and I have just jumped on the bandwagon, and therefore I believe it because society has pushed it through. And then there's desire, and that's really the main thing, right? It's I believe it to be true just because I want it to be true. Therefore, I go and I look for proof to support my position before actually researching it. So it's the same thing. He's saying at the root of why we don't address those little issues of the heart is because at the end of the day, our lustful desire, we don't want it. What it would mean to address that, like, means that we have to give up something I really, really want. And I'm not prepared to give up something I really, really want. So I don't want to feel bad about myself. So I rationalize it in the depths of my heart to make it okay. But at the root of that, it means that there's absolute integrity and purity. There's well, not purity. That's a different meter that we're going to talk about later. But cleanliness, that I'm a clean slate. I don't even have those things, those matters of the heart. He is not entirely cleansed of it, and um, therefore is not it is able to entice him towards leniency. Oh, he okay. We're not talking about cleanliness here. I was like, what does that mean? He's saying that person, right? He's not entirely cleansed of it because it exists there dormant. It's something that he has not addressed. He has not come to the brutal honesty that one needs to do with themselves. But a person who is thoroughly cleansed of his blemish of any trace of evil that desire leaves in the wake of his it will be sharp-eyed and keenly discerning, and he will not be swayed in any manner because he's already reached that level. Therefore, he will not be able to recognize as evil anything that could be a sin, even the most minor of sins. He will distance himself from it. Accordingly, the sages in Sanhedrin refer to those who have completely purified their actions, and not even a stirring of evil remains, as it says, the clean mind of Yerushalayim, the clean mind. So there you go. That's the pasuk. Nikiye hadas sheb Yerushalayim, cleanliness, right? There's a lot of overlap here. Now, I might use words interchangeable like purity to be mystic, right? Or righteousness, tzidkis, right? Pious, piety, things like that, chasidus, chassid. But they all have different slight variations. But here you see that in the Gemara Sanhedrin they refer to this midah as nikias. So now you can see the difference between one who possesses the virtue of vigilance and one who possesses the virtue of cleanliness, even though they are similar to each other in their makeup. The vigilant person is one who's careful about his actions and makes sure not to sin in those areas that are already known to him, and they are universally acknowledged as sin. However, such a person is not sufficiently mastered over himself to prevent himself from being emotionally drawn towards innate desires, right? If the person is mastered vigilance, if they're super, super have zahiros, they're aware of everything, they're monitoring themselves. Yes, they will not come to sin because they're monitoring themselves, but they will still have that lustful desire that will try to draw them towards sin. And those who mislead by permitting him knows those who is evil is not widely known. This means that although he tries to conquer his evil inclinations to do his desires, it will not change his very nature and will still be incapable of removing corporeal lust from his heart. All he can do is subliminate it. That's what I was saying before, right? You might not ever get rid of it. You just have to live a life of managing it. Lahavdil, those people who like struggle with addiction. Some people can move on with life. Other people, every single day, they need to remind themselves. You know those. Hopefully, you don't. You met those alcoholics who really got hit hard, and you see them, and you're just like, day 11,614. Day 11,600. Every day to them is like, right? Because they haven't, they're never going to get over that every day. So that's right, talking about the person who masters the vigilance on it. But you want ultimately, get to a place where you've removed it entire. All he can do is sublimate it in pure wisdom rather than lust, but the darkness of the corporeal is nevertheless affecting him, swaying him, and enticing him. So, before I go weiter, I want to now go off on the tangent, but break down what does it mean to grow? And we use the term all the time in NCSY. We talk about growth, and yeshiva and seminary is a time for growth, and there's growth, and we love growth and growth. And food is for the soul. What I'm sorry, food is for the body. What growth is for the soul. What does it mean to grow? And this is the most simplest of formulas for us to understand how to do it. First, it comes obviously with self-awareness. Like Akiva Tatz talks in chapter 5 in the Teenage Thinking Got a Life, that a person should make a list, a shopping list. What am I? What are my positives? What are my negatives? Now, what are the positive things that I want for myself out there? And then it's very simple. Through repetition of action over and over and over again, you are molding yourself into that person. As we say, thoughts become choices, choices become actions, actions become habit, habit becomes character. What you do, right? Let's say I want to smile at people more. Then I force myself every time I see people to smile and smile and smile. And after a few months, what happens? It becomes a habit. Now, you are what your habits are, but there's a caveat to that. Are the habits that a person is conditioning themselves to be happening on their own because of autopilot? Or are you proactively creating your second nature? There's nature and there's second nature. Why do we use the term second nature? Right? It becomes part of you. It's your second nature that you've created for yourself because you've made the conscious decision to formulate what your habits are. And when they become habits, they become your character, they become who you are. So that's what it is. You can say, I want to be all these different things. Then you repeat it over and over and over again until it becomes a part of you. Because in Yiddishkeit, whether it comes to midos or whether it comes to halacha, when it comes to actions, you don't want to be doing things, you want to become things. I don't keep Shabbos, I am Shabbos. I don't keep tznius, I am tznius. I don't keep kosher, I am kosher, but also character traits as well, right? I don't do kindness. I am kindness, right? I don't exercise patience. I am patient, right? Now, for me, it's like in all honesty and just being super open here, right? There's certain midos that I struggle with, and I know I'm going to struggle with for the rest of my life. I'm going to be stuck in this element of constant zeros and making sure that I'm always keeping certain negative midos at bay and also trying to amplify and bolster the positive midos. Now, oh, excuse me. Whew. That time of week. But that's what it is. Do you want to know what growth looks like? Growth is coming up with a shopping list of desired outcomes, then just practicing it. And by the way, that's why I love yeshiva and seminary if it's done right, because it's a perfect and a beautiful opportunity to actually practice things. Like, okay, for the next 3 months, I'm going to dedicate towards this midah that I want to work on. And you have no other responsibilities in life other than focusing on that midah. How beautiful is that? And you're surrounded by teachers and support system who help you get there, which is really, really beautiful. But that's what it is. That is the definition of growth. That is how a person grows. They just practice it over time. It becomes their habit. It becomes who they truly are. So we're on page 54 in the middle over here. However, once a person has accustomed himself to vigilance by undergoing primary cleansing of the acknowledged sins, by performing the service of the eternal with regularity and alacrity, right? This is again how you do it. Regularity, meaning I do it often, and with alacrity, meaning I do it quick, right? When I'm working on something, every time that opportunity, great. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that every time it comes. And by the intensifying his love and longing for the eternal, you can't forget that, right? It has to be steamed, it has to be fueled by your love for Hashem. Then the power of these habits will distance him from the corporal matters, and his mind will cleave to the spiritual perfection that will ultimately lead him to the perfection of cleanliness. And there's a very famous Gemara in Pesachim. We talk about this when we talk about actions versus intentions. For those of you who are on TJJ, well, I mean, whatever, those who were or were not, but you're never gonna, oh my God, nobody here ever had the Shana Aleph curriculum on TJJ. That's so wild. That's crazy. But in any case, one of the most famous chaburas that we have is actions versus intention and learning about how God judges in effort. And one of the strategies that we talked about in Gemara Pesachim is that right? When a person shelo lishma mo lishma. Now, when a person does something not for the right intentions, eventually the right intentions will come. Meaning the action really is it's the right intentions because it's for the purpose of. There's two ways that a person can get inspired to go to the gym. Number one is you can get inspired and then go to the gym, or you can consistently go to the gym every single day, and then after 3 weeks, when you start to see results and it's part of your schedule, that will create inspiration. So there are two sides of the same coin. There are two strategic approaches to generating inspiration. So here as well, right? If a person says, okay, by conditioning yourself and becoming, getting to the place of the midah of Nikios, by conditioning yourself and working hard at repetition and through zrizas and you become that person, eventually you're going to find that beautiful love for Hashem. Now, obviously, intellectually, you could say, I don't feel it, but I understand that that's what my aim is, and I have that, and I want to feel it, and I want to experience it, right? This will, becoming this person and working on yourself. It brings me back to the how many times do you hear, why do I have to become more religious? Why can't I just be a good person? And it's like, hello, dumb, dumb, stupid. What does it mean to be a good person? It means following the word of Hashem. How do you define what good is? If not for Hashem, right? Hashem decides what is good by definition and what's not good, what's evil. So by doing good, you're doing the word of Hashem, you're growing, you're naturally becoming, working on yourself, character development is the path to Dvekas with Hashem. Anybody who works on themselves and becomes a better person is naturally at the same time, even if they think they're an atheist, they're getting closer to Hashem. Okay, that's my extreme example. But why? Because you're connecting to something more bigger than yourself. You're connecting to the elements of your neshama. You're doing chesed for others. Of course, you're going to find that connection. So doing these things as well is going to bring about also that to make us to Hashem as well. The fire of physical desire will be extinguished from his heart, and spiritual longing intensifies, and his perception will remain clear and lucid, as I've written above, right? We said Sur Meirav Yasei Tov, and the Piazetzna, right? The Eish Kodesh says, how are you going to invite a king into a room that's full of schmutz? When a person removes all the negative things from their heart, it's not dormant, they're not spending their time and energy trying to survive. Then there's room for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He could come and he could live within you. Then you've turned Vyasuli Mikdash. You've turned yourself into a Mikdash, and now Hashem can dwell there with you. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? When a person is the top of the pyramid is what's most important, self-actualization. And yet, when you're struggling for food and shelter, then there's no time to focus on those things. And in the same way as well, to some degree, right? If a person wants the Vegas with Hashem, if they are just constantly plagued by the negative midos that are inside them, then where is that connection going to come, right? You gotta go on TJJ because they just make it easy for you. But it's the same idea. David HaMelech, he rejoiced over his possessions of his virtue and declared in the Hillim, I wash my hands in cleanliness and encircle your altar, O Eternal. Right? Alluding to the different times where the Midah of Nikias is being highlighted. Only one who has been completely cleansed of any stirring of sin and transgression is worthy of seeing the countenance of the King, the Eternal. That's exactly what it said. You want to experience, as the Kotzker Rebbe, right? Where does Hashem exist? Wherever you make space for him, wherever you find him, wherever you're looking for him. If you do that for yourself, if you make yourself a keli that's ready to be makabel, the Eibishter, right? If you want to purify yourself, then Hashem, then the connection comes hand in hand. It's a really a beautiful process. And by the way, this is when you know that when people go to yeshiva and seminary and they have like these epiphanies, it happens in like anywhere between March and February, where it's just like I get that phone call, it's like, whoa, Avi. I get it now. It just all makes sense. Like this total debate. Why? Because they've worked on themselves enough and they passed that threshold where all of a sudden Hashem just enters into their being and they're just like, oh my God, like I see with absolute clarity. I'm living Hashem right now because I've put in the effort. I've moved the schmutz out of myself. I've become a clean person and now Hashem exists within you. I want to make one other thing as well. Only deficiency can help feeling embarrassed and shame before his presence. Ezra Sofer said, my Lord, I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed to raise my countenance towards you, O Lord. This is when we talk about Kedusha, holiness, right? And how a person can become holy and condition yourself into a mikdash. It's very important to understand as well that holiness, Kedusha, is also something that Surmei Rav Yasi Tov. It's not just about removing the schmutz, but also, right, what the schmutz does for a person. There's a common phenomenon that always happens in the summer. Kids are bringing out their speakers in the back of the bus and they start blasting the most vulgar, disgusting, which I don't even know how you call music because it's not music. It's literally an illiterate human being whining with auto tune into a mic with really horrible beats. And somehow that's considered, right? This person who probably didn't even graduate high school, um, is in good company because that's me as well. And you're right, like, it's just like you don't even know what they look like because of like all the tattoos on the face and the weird yellow teeth and what you get the point I'm trying to make. And it's like about and the kids are blasting that music in the back of the bus, and the advisor, right? Typically, if you play that near an advisor, either they'll tell you to turn it off or they'll walk away, right? Or they'll go, "Oh, mine is shama, mine is shama," right? I have a sensitivity towards cursing. I hate when people curse. It's disgusting. It bothers me so much. So if someone is running their mouth, I don't want to sit next to them. I don't want to be near that person. I just don't. I want to walk away, right? When someone is doing something that's incredibly vulgar, I don't want to be around that. I want to. Now, why? So they might think, oh, they're such a prude, my advisors. They don't know this music. Do you know how ratchet that advisor was in high school? I'm thinking of a few people, right? It's not that they're naive and they're sheltered their whole life and they're scared. That's not why they don't want to be exposed to that stuff because they're trying to create themselves into a vessel of kedusha. Because they want Hashem to dwell within them. They want to experience. And how can you do that when you're constantly filled? Now, people don't think this is one of the dangers of like Netflix and TikTok and everything that you're allowing your eyes to go in and make an imprint on your memory, on the way that you think, on your thoughts, right? Your psyche, what you're daydreaming about, what you're getting distracted with your ADHD, everything you're allowing into your ears and your eyes affects you and it takes up some physical, really spiritual, but you get the idea, takes up some section in you. Some emotional energy was devoted to it. And that schmutz prevents you from being in this place of nikias, of cleanliness, to feel that connection and the vekas with Hashem. It's a very deep mila. Now, why would anybody go onto a TJJ bus? So the challenge for us is to make it more of a place of kedusha, where that can reign true. But it's very hard. It's very hard working in outreach where you're surrounded by schmutz all day long. It's not an enjoyable thing. It desensitizes a person to some degree, and that's part of the sacrifice that we have to make for the betterment of Klal Yisrael, for sure. But don't think that, again, like what you expose, what you bring into your home. You want your home to be a place of Kedusha, then what are you bringing into your house? What are the things hanging on your wall? What's the messaging? What's the conversation at the Shabbos table? If a person wants to make themselves and embody this midah of Nikias, then they have to remove the schmutz, right? It's not just about proactively and conditioning yourself, but also being very mindful of what's entering in, you know? It's a terrible thing. Um, you guys understand that point? Like really like what it is to make yourself into a mikdash, into like kedusha and be sensitive, right? Shmiras einayim, shmiras eznayim. What are you listening to? What are you hearing? Without a doubt, we're at the bottom of page 54 now. Without a doubt, a person will have to do great deal of work in order to perfect this virtue. Your entire life, your entire life. And by the way, not at all like to become what he's describing. That's why I introduced it like that. I didn't want anyone to get too stressed out. Like, this is never gonna happen. Okay. But the point is not to reach that place. The point is to strive to get to that place, not like, oh, I failed because I didn't get there, right? The 20 to 50 is better than the 80 to the 90. Our job is to just strive for that perfection. So don't get stressed out like, oh my God, how am I ever going to be the purest person who doesn't have bad thoughts or desires to do things that are wrong outside of the realm of my reality? Yeah, don't get stressed out. Those sins that are recognizable are known, are easy for one to be careful about since their ill effect are clearly recognizable. However, the meticulousness that the cleanliness demands is more difficult since the process of internal rationalization conceals the sin, as I have written. That requires some deep, deep cheshbon nefesh to really get, why do I have that thought? And you actually, it's exhausting. When you're laying in bed at night and you're thinking to yourself, like, there's that issue that it's like you've never spoken it or said it out before, but it's in there deep down. When you start going down that rabbit hole and you start to really clean out, like in the gums, the plaque, and you're schmussing it all out, that is what's going to be the roadmap to get to a person to be this cleanly person, right? I'm talking to people who are like naturally have this meetup, but for the most part, oh, I'm sorry. No, last year at prom, we did a big Avera. We went and we did the whole thing. Yeah, yeah. Very good. As our sages of blessed memory, she is. I knew that would trigger you.
No, I actually had a question before that, and I was
Okay.
like, I'm not gonna ask it, but then you said that, so then I was like, I don't feel bad talking in Zoom
Okay,
now
good.
because
Good.
I feel bad talking in your recording.
Are you
But
serious?
yeah,
No, you gotta interrupt all the time.
what's it called? But then you said that I was like, okay, people know I'm here anyway now, so might as well.
Oh, that's fine.
Um, but what's it called? You were saying like 2 weeks ago in the therapy class. Um, I'm referring to it as that, but you were saying that like spiraling is bad and thinking like overthinking things and all of those things. But now you're saying, okay, it's fine, like go down the rabbit hole of like that's bad and that's really bad. But like that is spiraling. That's what creates spiraling.
Whoa, whoa, that's not overthinking anything. That's those are the demons in the closet that you just never really try to address. Those little things, those deficiencies in use, they of course they have to be addressed one day. How deep is the work? You know, when people go like, okay, to make a therapy reference, right? When people are going to therapy, there's levels of depth that they're willing to go. Now they have to be ready and prepared for it. But some people will do some intense things like, EMDR, right? They're like, all right, are you ready to really, really like, I know you have issues with your parents, but are you ready to like go deep? There has to come a time where you do that spiritually as well. That's not overthinking. Overthinking means it's a intrusive, non-productive thought of something that's negative, right? Let's say, guy, let's talk about Shmiras Einayim. It's like a serious thing. Guys have to like watch their eyes, right? So you're walking down and yeah, a guy catches something that they know they shouldn't look at. It's the same thing. At that moment, now your seichel pops in, shut it down. Don't go down that hole. Don't go down that rabbit hole. And then they give themselves to it and they go, okay, whatever, listen, it's right there. What's the big deal? And then they end up just full on like staring and, ogling at something they shouldn't be looking at. That's what I mean. That's not thinking too much. That's doing a healthy process of getting into to the schmutz because it has to come out eventually. You can't live your whole life just like complacent with those thoughts.
Okay, obviously, but you're like going down a rabbit hole is overthinking.
I
Okay,
know it's not. Why do you say that?
because you're like that is
You're not spiraling.
spiraling.
You're not spiraling. That's like again to stick someone's trauma in their face way before they're ready to address it. Yes, that might not be healthy. That might just spiral them at that moment, right? They might become hysterical, but there's things need to be addressed in a healthy way. Going down the rabbit hole is not overthinking it. Going down which rabbit hole, right? For example, let's say you've
Okay, so
already thought it,
it just has to be the right one.
right. Let's say you thought it out.
Okay.
There's nothing more productive, right? It's an irrational fear. It's going to go away by itself, right? The way that this girl thinks about you, you're graduating as a senior and she's moving to New Zealand. You know, there's nothing to like now she moved away. You're sitting there continuing to think about why you're never going to get to the bottom of that rabbit hole. So you're overthinking things, right? Also, by the way, there is a huge difference between your rabbit holes and someone else's, right? If someone else, if you're bothered by something you have no control over, then there has to be a limit of is it productive to go there? Because I don't have control. If I find something at the bottom of that rabbit hole that I have no control over addressing, then that'll just torment me. Why would I do that to myself? Versus my own rabbit holes, which I absolutely have the ability to manage that with my mentors or therapist or whatever. Yes, which rabbit holes is extremely important, right? And your own conscience, your own psyche, that are the root of your mitos, of course, those need to be addressed. He talked about it in the beginning. The Ramchal talked about it in the beginning. He's right, introspection and then prodding, like prying, like into it, like analyzing your deeds, but then analyzing the why of your deeds. That requires thinking. That's not overthinking. That's asking the questions. Why do I do, act, and say the things that I do? I need to know that. Knowing what as the why at the inception of the thought or the action will teach me a lot about myself, and that's something that's I think extremely important. Um, okay, let's finish up the chapter here. Um, right, our sages of blessed memory have taught us the sins that one crushes with his heel encircles him at the time of judgment. Oh, deep. In a similar vein, the sages of blessed memory of Baba Basra, the majority of people are guilty of theft, a minority are guilty of incest, and everyone is guilty of Avka Lashon Hara. It's true as well. Due to the subtle nature of the last manner, all people fall into this error since they do not perceive the prohibitions involved. And that's, by the way, the Chavetz Chaim came along to bring that to the forefront because it's so easy to talk Lashon Hara. David HaMelech, his level of Nikias. Our sages of blessed memory also taught that David was vigilant and cleansed himself thoroughly of the aforementioned transgression. As a result, he went to war with full confidence, requesting, let me pursue my foes and overtake them, do not return until they're destroyed." Though neither Yehoshaphat, Asa, nor Chizkiyahu, these are all different kings of Melech Yehuda, Malchus Yehuda, ever requested this since they did not obtain the same degree of Nikias. As David himself indicates with his Tehillim, reward me, O Eternal, and according to my righteousness, repay me with according to my cleanliness and my hands. And he further states, and all the Eternal has repaid me, and according to my righteousness, and according to the cleanliness of my hands before his eyes, which is a reference to the purity and the cleanliness that was mentioned previously. He returns to this theme further on. Trusting in you, I will run without fear to the enemy's camp. With my God, I will leap over my enemy's wall, and let me pursue my foes and overtake them. And it was David who adds, "What? Who may ascend to the mountain of the Eternal? Who may stand in the place of holiness? Mi ya'aleh b'har Hashem, u'mi yakum b'mkom kodshay." It's a beautiful line. Niki kapayim v'varalev. One who is clean and pure of hearts. All different psukim, by the way. You learn a lot about David and Melech by dissecting his Tehillim. Tehillim. The virtue is very difficult to obtain since man's nature is weak and his heart surrenders easily to temptation, and he permits himself to do those things whose faults can be rationalized. Someone who has acquitted this virtue has unquestionably reached a lofty level, for he has withstood the intense war and emerged victorious. Now let us examine the details of this virtue. So that's the basic overview. He's basically saying once you get to a point where you've conquered your free will battle sufficiently to where it's not even so much testing you anymore. Now, obviously, there's going to be other tests and things like that, but a person reaches to this place of where it's second nature. It's who you are. I do the thing. I'm sorry, I am the thing. I don't do the thing. That's ultimately what we want to get to, right? We don't want to be stuck in the spiritual seesaw of, hey, I do sufficient enough to fight it back, but I don't eliminate the issue. Similarly, if I may use this as a reference, because it's apropos, Israel versus Hamas or the Palestinian issue, right? At the end of the day, the only solution is total victory. Not, we've destroyed their military capability for the next 10 years. Just going to come back again, right? Total victory. That's what Nikias is. Total victory over that Yetzer Hara that where you've totally pushed and eliminated everything else. So we'll stop here. We'll continue on chapter 11. But big takeaway, very important. When a person says, hey, what's the formula? If I want to work on myself, what do I do? Just gave you the answer, right? You take the thing, you come up with a game plan with your mentor, repetition of the action, eventually it becomes a habit, and your habit becomes your character. That becomes who you are. It's fun stuff. Okay. Shkayach. We will stop here and do one irrelevant question. Is that fair? Are there any relevant questions actually on the actual topic? Even if there would be an army. Okay, no, we're not doing it. Okay. A good Nacht to all. Whoops, I almost pushed the wrong thing. There we go.